The doctors had stopped talking about getting better. That's how Raymond Holt knew. Not from the scans, not from the numbers on the chart, not even from the way the oncologist had started sitting down when he came into the room instead of standing the way doctors stand when they still have good options to discuss. He knew because they stopped saying when you're better and started saying while you're comfortable. 71 years old. Lung cancer, stage 4. Diagnosed in February, and now it was September, and the leaves outside his hospital window were just beginning to turn. And Raymond was lying in a bed that wasn't his, breathing through equipment that was doing half the work for him, thinking about all the things he should have said to the people he loved most. He had lived a hard life and a long one. He had done things he was proud of and things he was not. He had been a father, not always a good one. A husband, not always a faithful one. A man who had spent most of his 7 decades doing things his way, on his terms, answering to no one. And who was now, in the particular humbling that only a hospital bed in September can produce, beginning to reckon with what that had cost. His daughter, Angela, was asleep in the chair by the window. She had been there for 3 days. Raymond looked at her in the low light and felt something so enormous he didn't have a name for it. He had not been the father she deserved, but she was here anyway, and in 3 days, in that same hospital bed, Raymond Holt was going to see something that would undo and remake every single thing he thought he knew about what waited on the other side of this life. Raymond Holt had built himself from nothing, and he wanted you to know it. Born in rural Alabama in 1952, the youngest of 6 children, son of a man who worked the land and drank what he earned and didn't speak much and didn't need to, Raymond learned young that the world was not going to give you anything. You had to take it. You had to work for it until your hands bled and then work some more. And you didn't ask for help, and you didn't show weakness, and you didn't let anyone close enough to use it against you. He took those lessons and he built a life with them. Construction business, started with 1 truck and 1 employee, himself, and grown over 30 years into something real, something with his name on the side of buildings across 3 counties. He was proud of that. He had a right to be proud of that. But the things those lessons cost him, those were the things lying quiet and heavy on Raymond's chest in that hospital bed, heavier some nights than the cancer itself. He had married Patricia when he was 24. She was soft and bright and completely sure that the hardness in Raymond was something she could reach through if she just loved him long enough and well enough. She loved him for 19 years. She reached through and reached through and reached through, and finally, exhausted, sad-eyed, still kind in her leaving the way she had been kind in her staying, she stopped reaching. He didn't fight for her. That was the thing that haunted him most. Lying there in September. He had let Patricia go because letting her go was easier than opening up and being known, and he had told himself for 47 years that he didn't regret it. He had been lying. Angela was Patricia's daughter, their daughter, but Patricia's in the ways that mattered. She had her mother's brightness and her mother's stubborn belief that her father was worth loving despite the evidence. She had called him every Sunday for 30 years. He had answered maybe half the time. She had shown up at every Christmas he'd invited her to, and some he hadn't. She had sent birthday cards in his handwriting style so he'd know she'd thought about what he liked. And when the diagnosis came in February, Angela had shown up at his apartment with a casserole and a rolling suitcase, and the simple announcement that she was going to help him through this. Raymond had told her he didn't need help. She had started unpacking anyway. They had 2 other children, Raymond Jr., who lived in Phoenix and called twice during the whole illness, and Michael, who had broken from Raymond 20 years ago over something Raymond could no longer fully remember but had been too proud to repair. Michael didn't come. That was the wound that wouldn't close. Lying in that bed, watching the leaves turn outside his window, Raymond kept thinking about Michael. kept thinking about a 22-year-old kid who had needed his father to say, "I'm sorry, and I was wrong," and had instead gotten silence, and had eventually stopped waiting for something that was never going to come. Raymond had never been able to say those words. Not to Michael, not to Patricia, not to Angela, not really, not with the fullness they deserved. He was 71 years old, and he was running out of time to learn how. He wasn't a man of faith. He had been raised around church. His mother had taken all 6 children every Sunday without fail, and Raymond had sat in those pews and sung the hymns and felt, when he was very young, something he could only describe as a warmth in his chest when the music swelled. But he had decided somewhere in his 20s that faith was a comfort for people who couldn't handle reality, and Raymond Holt could handle reality. And he had walked away from that warmth without looking back. He had not prayed in 50 years. He did not know how to start. It was 2 a.m. on a Thursday in September. Angela was asleep in the chair, a blanket pulled to her chin that the night nurse had brought her. The room was dim and quiet, except for the machines doing their patient, tireless work. Outside the window, the sky was the deep blue of the middle of the night, and Raymond was awake. He was always awake at 2 a.m. now, his body no longer trusting sleep the way it once had. He was thinking about Michael. He had been given Michael's phone number by Angela 3 weeks ago, folded on a piece of paper he'd put in the drawer of the bedside table. He had opened that drawer and looked at that paper every single day. He had not picked up the phone. He was too proud. He was too afraid. He was 71 years old, dying in a hospital bed, and he was still too proud to say I was wrong. He stared at the ceiling. And some last crumbling wall he hadn't known was still standing, finally gave way. He closed his eyes. He didn't fold his hands. He didn't have the strength, and he wouldn't have known what to do with them anyway. He just closed his eyes and he spoke. Not out loud, barely even in his own mind, more like a thought that knew where to go. God, I don't know if you're there. I don't know if you ever were. But I'm running out of time, and I have run out of excuses, and I have done a great deal of damage in this life, and I am sorry. I am genuinely sorry. He felt something shift somewhere in his chest at the word sorry, like it had broken something loose that had been stuck for a very long time. I was not the man I should have been. I was not the father my children needed, or the husband Patricia needed. I was not soft enough. I was so afraid of being soft. And I wasted it. I wasted so much time being hard when the people I loved needed something else entirely. His eyes were wet. Raymond Holt had not cried in he could not remember how long. I don't know what's waiting. I don't know if you're real. But my mother believed you were. She believed it her whole life, and she was the finest person I ever knew. So if you're there, if any of this is real, I need to know before I go. I need to know I'm not just disappearing. I need to know it meant something. He went quiet inside. The machines beeped their steady, patient rhythm. And Raymond Holt, who had not believed in anything beyond his own 2 hands for 50 years, fell asleep with tears drying on his face. And in his sleep, something happened that he would spend his remaining days trying to find the words for. He saw light first, not the flat, fluorescent light of a hospital room. Something warm and deep. The color of late afternoon in autumn, the particular gold of a day that is ending beautifully. He was standing somewhere. His body did not hurt. His lungs moved freely, easily, and he noticed that the way you notice something you've almost forgotten, with a shock of recognition, like remembering a word you'd lost. He was standing in a field. He did not know the field, and he knew the field completely, the way you know places in dreams that feel more real than anywhere you've actually been. And there was a man. Raymond would always struggle here in the telling of it. He would say, "I knew immediately who it was." Not because he looked like any picture I had ever seen, but the way you know a person you've loved a long time, from across a distance, just by the way they stand. By the way the air is different where they are. The man turned, and he looked at Raymond, and Raymond felt something he had spent his entire life running away from. He felt completely known, not judged, known. Every corner of him, every hardness and failure and closing of doors and swallowed apology and year of pride, known and looked at without flinching, known and not turned away from. Raymond tried to speak. What came out was not words. It was something closer to a sound a man makes when he has been carrying something unimaginably heavy for unimaginably long and is finally, at the very end of his strength, allowed to set it down. And Jesus, because Raymond knew, he simply knew, walked toward him and placed both hands on Raymond's face the way a father holds a son's face, the way Raymond had never held Michael's face, the way he had been too afraid to. And he said, "Raymond, you are known, all of it, and you are loved, all of it. It is not too late." Raymond wept. Standing in that golden field, 71 years old, every wall he had ever built dissolving like they had been made of nothing at all. He wept in the hands of someone who had been waiting for him longer than Raymond had been running. It is not too late. He woke up. The room was gray with early morning. Angela was still asleep in the chair. The machines were still beeping. Everything was exactly as it had been. But Raymond was not the same man who had fallen asleep. He reached out and opened the drawer of the bedside table. He picked up the piece of paper with Michael's phone number. He pressed the call button for the nurse. When she came in, he asked her, very quietly, because the breathing was still hard, if she could help him make a call. Michael answered on the fourth ring. He would say later that he almost didn't pick up. He didn't recognize the number, and he had spent 20 years training himself not to wait for a call that never came, and answering an unknown number at 6:30 in the morning felt like hope. And hope was something Michael Holt had learned to be careful with. He picked up. Michael. Just his name. But the way it was said, worn down to something true, all the hardness of it gone, leaving something that sounded, for the first time in Michael's memory, like his father's actual voice, Michael sat up in bed. "Dad, I need to say something to you, and I need you to let me finish because I don't know how long I'm going to have the breath for it." Michael was already crying. He couldn't have told you why. Something in the quality of his father's voice had reached right through the phone and landed in the place where 20 years of unanswered need had been living, and he was crying before he even knew what was coming. "I was wrong. About the way I left you. About the things I said, and the things I never said. About every time you reached for me and I wasn't reachable. I was wrong and I was too proud to tell you, and I wasted 20 years of knowing you because of it. I am sorry. I am deeply sorry. You deserved a better father than I was. I know that. I have always known that." Michael put his hand over his mouth. His father kept going, slower now, the breathing harder. "I don't have enough time left to make it right. I know that. But I had to say it. I couldn't go without saying it. You were worth more than I gave you, Michael. You always were." Silence on the line, both of them breathing. Father and son, 20 years of distance, and this, 6:30 in the morning, gray September light, a phone call made by a dying man who had finally let himself be changed. "I know, Dad," Michael said eventually. "I know." He flew in the next day. He sat beside his father's bed and they talked, not about everything, there wasn't time for everything, but about enough. About Michael's kids, Raymond's grandchildren he had never met, whose photographs now covered the bedside table. About what Raymond had seen in the night. About a man in a golden field who had said it is not too late. Michael held his father's hand. Raymond let him. On a Sunday afternoon in October, 2 weeks after that phone call, with Angela on one side and Michael on the other, and the October light coming golden through the window, Raymond Holt closed his eyes. His last words, barely above a breath, were words his children had never heard him say to anyone. "I love you both. Tell your mother I'm sorry. Tell her I finally understood." He was quiet for a moment. Then, and both Angela and Michael would swear to this until their own last days, a small smile crossed his face. The smile of a man who has just seen something beautiful. And Raymond Holt went home. Angela tells this story at her church now. She has told it dozens of times. She tells it the way her father eventually told things, plainly, without decoration, with the specific details that make people know it's real. She tells them about a man who spent 70 years being hard, who built things with his hands and kept walls around his heart, who sat in a hospital bed in September and ran out of pride at exactly the right moment. She tells them about a phone number in a drawer, about a golden field and a man who looked at her father, all of her father, every failure and closed door and wasted year, and did not look away, about the smile. "My father was not a soft man," she tells them. "He was not a faithful man, not in the religious sense. He didn't come to God through years of devotion and study. He came to God the way a lot of people do, through the floor, through running out of everything else. And God didn't make him wait, didn't make him earn it, didn't say, 'You should have come sooner, you should have lived better, you have too much ground to make up.' He met him in a field. He held his face. He said, 'You are known. You are loved. It is not too late.' My father called my brother at 6:30 in the morning and said he was wrong, and that phone call healed something in my family that had been broken for 20 years. That is what Jesus does. He doesn't wait for you to deserve it. He meets you exactly where you are, in the hospital bed, in the field, in the 6:30 morning of your life. And he says the one thing you have been most starving to hear. Maybe you have been hard for a long time. Maybe there are people in your life who are waiting for a phone call you have been too proud to make. A child, a parent, a friend you wronged and never went back to, a relationship that has been broken for so long that you've started to think of the breaking as permanent. Maybe you're the one waiting for the call. Maybe you have been waiting for years. Hear this. Hear this carefully. It is not too late. Not for you. Not for the people you love. Not for the relationships that feel past saving. Not for the prayers you stopped praying. Not for the faith you walked away from. God is not a God who looks at your history and calculates whether you have enough left to justify his time. He is a God who meets dying men in the middle of the night and holds their faces and says, "I know you, all of you, and I am not finished." You don't have to wait until a hospital bed in September. You can pick up the phone today. You can close your eyes right now and say the truest thing you know, in the plainest words you have, to the God who has been standing in that field and waiting for you with more patience than you could ever measure. He will meet you there. He always does. Because that is who he is. The God who waits in the field. The God who holds the face. The God who says, even now, even you, even here, it is not too late. If you're walking through grief, illness, or a difficult season with a loved one, please know you don't have to carry it alone. Reach out to someone in your community, a pastor, a counselor, a friend who can sit with you in it. And if you or someone you know needs immediate support, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24 hours a day. Call or text 988. If this story moved something in you today, share it. You never know whose phone call it might help someone finally make. God bless you. We'll see you in the next one.